Great. So let's get started. So I wanted to start by something like if you build it, they'll come. I think most of us think if we have technology tools or platforms, users will come use it. But the statement is rarely true when it comes to user adoption. And that's something that we saw with Yammer at Aon too. But how did we work on Yammer adoption at Aon? We looked at a couple of things very differently. So we first of all defined for ourselves what is user adoption. Uh, do we just want to say we deployed Yammer globally, or do we want to look at how many colleagues at Aon are using Yammer actually? Um, we tried and separated technology from colleagues. Instead of saying it's a tool you should use, we kind of worked around how do colleagues um, get through their day? What are their challenges? How can those be solved through Yammer? So instead of telling them to come and use a tool to resolve their problem, we tried pushing out solutions through Yammer to start helping them. And these are topics I'll talk about during my presentation today. We simplified our messaging. So I've attended a couple of sessions today and really interesting insights. When we try and launch a product, we all have a certain uh, sort of campaign or communication plan, change management plan in line. What we realized was when you go in, a lot of times you have to be adaptive in terms of how your audience is reacting. And I struggle to see that with a lot of technology tools. So that is something that we focused on. We tried to adapt to how users were adopting the tool versus having them to change drastically in how they are working day to day. Because uh, come to think of it, there has been a lot of change over the last year and a half for everybody who's on this call. And lastly, governance. Now, when we talk about governance, everybody talks about like who's handling what, how do we set processes, things like that. But we actually took it to the next level to say, how do we enable colleagues to use Yammer more effectively? And at Aon, I would say Yammer was at Aon before Aon got it as an official product. We've been growing by acquisition, so we had a lot of companies we had acquired over the years which were using Yammer before officially we launched it at Aon as an enterprise social network. Um, since we inherited so much, there were so many different kind of audience we were dealing with in terms of how they were using Yammer. And by the time we kind of consolidated all our networks into one, we had about 5,000 Yammer communities. We had over 60,000 users at one point. Uh, I took up this role about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, and at that time, only 800 communities were active. And there were so many communities. We had no admins, no new conversations, no sponsorship. There was a lot of baggage with Yammer too, in terms of it's only noise. There's so much, I don't want to see pet pictures. I don't want to see recipes. I don't see any business conversations. I don't know how, I don't understand it. We've heard it all. And it's surprising because you see that the same set of people would be so social media friendly in their personal lives versus when they come to work. And so we thought it was pertinent or important for us to approach Yammer in a similar fashion. So when we looked at our approach for adoption, we looked at identifying emotional perceptions and how that would impact an individual or an organization who we would want to um, target to start using or leveraging Yammer more effectively. And it's difficult to sever that negative feeling that people have that I don't understand what this is. And so what we told them was, it's fine if you don't want to use it only if it serves a purpose for you. And I'll talk about a couple of things I've heard over the years. Like everybody who wants to use Yammer would say, we want to use it for colleague engagement or we want to use it for collaboration. but it's very generic. What do those terms mean for you when you come to a community, a Yammer community? So we did kind of get into those kind of details. Uh, the two things that I'll focus on for this session is our structured community audit practice. We started archiving communities which had not been active in a while, and now we run this as a quarterly activity, and it really helps us on a lot of things. We remove them from our listings, from our search results. I actually don't know how that works with the home feed algorithm, which I would connect with Microsoft after this, but we remove them from our reporting, and that actually helps us to see how many communities are engaged day to day. We also put a tighter governance in all company community, and I did hear some really good feedback about all company in some of the earlier sessions as well. We Most of the campaigns that we deploy on Yammer are very data driven. We look at analytics. We use tygraph. We look at analytics, reporting, anything that can help us define what kind of campaigns would work with which kind of audience. So we have like a campaign planner, and we leverage that to implement it versus just kind of pushing campaigns out. Um, and then lastly, we focus on relationship building with Yammer community managers. We do a lot of rinse repeat campaigns because a lot of times you'll start very excitedly with a community, and then it kind of rises through the first 2 months, and then slowly it'll trigger down and die. And so we come up with these rinse and repeat campaigns that even if you are doing bare minimum, you can keep up the engagement. Um, So as we talk about the structured community audit practice, when I got into this role, I said earlier we had about 5,000 communities, and we were struggling to push the number up. So we kind of followed the general internet trend of 90s to 9:1 to say 90% of the people will consume content, 9% will contribute, and 1% would be super active, right? But what was happening was every year we would say we want to try and push it by 10 basis points, and it wasn't working because we pushed the 800 number up, but the total number of communities would also increase. And so that we couldn't understand what to do. And then I have an analytics background, so my team, we thought, what if we could push this 500 number down, 5,000 number down? So what we do now is we export our community data in a spreadsheet, and I'll show you some screenshots of how it looks like. We filter the communities which have been inactive for the last 12 months and have 0 messages. In addition, we also kind of try and find out if communities don't have any admins. So we take those, we clean up the data, and we have created this macro spreadsheet where we send out automated emails to all these community owners who have inactive communities to say that we'd be archiving your community by such and such date. And if you have a need, please reach out to us. The responses are automatically updated in a centralized spreadsheet, and we track how many people have been sent the emails. All those things are automated. So a lot of it was manual work the first time we did it, but now it's sort of cleaned up over time. And then we categorize the responses in our shared mailbox based on further action. So communities which are archived, now since Yammer does not provide us out-of-box functionality of archiving communities, we prefix each community with Z archived and then the community name, only because it goes down in the list of communities alphabetically since it doesn't have any activity anyway. We change the community settings, make it private, and remove it from network directory and search results. And then at an admin level, we mute the community for the network and restrict the posting permissions for that so that nobody's posting in an archive community. Communities where we receive responses that we want to retain it, we work with them to say, why do you want it retained? You haven't looked at it for a year. And then we give them a refresher training for community managers, give them some rinse repeat campaigns if they have a good use case. And then we work with them to define KPIs. So earlier we said, define what does collaboration mean for you. And we drill down into specific objectives they want to achieve from that community, set those KPIs with them, and then and we provide them with an on-demand scorecard to say, if they implemented 3 campaigns, how did it impact their collaboration or engagement? And if we give them a 3-month extension because we do this quarterly. So the next time, again, if they have an inactive community, then it is archived. So as of today, the denominator that we have is probably around 890 overall communities, and we have about 775 active communities. So I kind of just pulled some screenshots or sample screens. The one at the top is an export. These are the fields we capture because a lot of times it helps. Sometimes the community was created 2 days ago and you don't want to archive it. And then we have the creator, the admins, just in case we don't find one or the other. And we also look at number of members and messages. Sometimes that's huge, so you want to look at that community separately. The next one is the macro that has automated emails and response collection. So you can actually just see, once we clean up the spreadsheet, we just click this button here which says send email, and it sends email out to, whatever 150 people are there in the spreadsheet. And once the mail is sent, it says sent, and if a response is received, it would say received. And then I just also put a sample of the email that we send out. Now, we've been doing a couple of things over the last few years, which I talked about earlier. But in 2020, we began the year with, planned rinse repeat campaigns, focus on certain groups, etc. But come March, we had the lockdown, and remote working drove colleagues for social interaction. We never sort of anticipated that we'll get that much traffic from colleagues onto Yammer because we dealt with a lot of baggage in the past. But what happened was, as we had a lot of colleagues on Yammer asking questions and people were talking about remote working, work from home, things like that, we saw leaders becoming active on Yammer to keep up with, to keep up the morale and employee engagement with the remote working environment. And sometime mid last year is when we launched the new Yammer globally to Aon. And that's when we started partnering with our global communications team to leverage Yammer more effectively. So all these things kind of went hand in hand, and then thoughtful campaigns, rich content, higher number of engaged colleagues actually drew in more traffic. We saw a lot more people coming in from different areas where we had never seen colleagues using Yammer. We did sort of see the raise to about 12,000 engaged users, which actually means they were actively engaging in interactions. We have a user base of about 50,000. And this year, so far, we've seen the engaged users rise up to 38,000 colleagues. Now, as more and more teams are using All Company to increase reach of messages, and we see high interest from top leadership to post announcements on Yammer, use featured conversations, there is an immense need to enhance the governance model. So, where we started to where we are. And, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. This is our step 8, continuous enhancement of governance model, not only based on lessons learned, but also what Microsoft continues to introduce, taking that into consideration. And, success brings its own unique set of challenges. And this is what I was talking about in the previous slide. Features like pinning a post, featured conversation, posting on behalf of. Everyone has been rushing to use these and promote their content. HR wants to announce new colleague initiatives from stock options to well-beings, ID announcing new implementations, data security, trainings, and they see almost like 200% jump in registrations when they post on Yammer. And so that's when we partnered again with our global communications team to roll out some Yammer guidelines and best practices that would enable colleagues to leverage Yammer in a better format. So we've just rolled this out last week. It's pretty new. And I'm actually prepping for my next session next year where I come back and tell you how our performance was the entire year after we implemented this. So for all company, we've kind of come up with, I'm sorry, I think, yeah. So for all company, we came up with what are the different kind of conversations that you can have in all company, an announcement, a featured news, an all company pinned post, or any just a generic post. And we said, when do you use which kind of post? Like when do you use an announcement? What are the rules for an announcement? So with that, we kind of were going a lot of back and forth. Internally, the slide has some uh, specific examples of posts so that colleagues can relate to it. But for the purpose of this deck, I've removed that. But we literally gave them a decision metrics to make it easier for them to say you can only post an announcement if you have a call to action and it's time sensitive and who can post it. We thought about restricting posting in all company, and I also remember Lawrence talking about all company becoming an announcement sort of portal, or Yammer becoming announcement sort of portal. So these rules we have implemented to avoid that. We refrained from restricting posting because I feel like colleagues come in and talk on Yammer. If you tell them, no, you cannot post here, it kind of inhibits them to come and post anywhere. So these are some of the rules we put out there. And one of the rules is you cannot have an announcement and a featured post, which is, we're just saying featured post provides you an email in a staggered way. So why waste that email real estate? Because colleagues already get maybe like 4 to 5 emails if they never bother to change their notification. We also rolled out some best practices. Some of these are from the SWOOP report that Kai also shared earlier about a good Yammer post. So we said what is best practice for announcement, for Yammer post, and then how can you elevate or increase or increase the impact of your Yammer post. So these are all things that we've shared broadly with our colleagues and community managers. And I just want to talk about the continued Yammer adoption that we are focusing on at Aon to end this session with, which is mainly around the shift from this is nuisance noise to yes, this is so useful to us. And the rollout of the governance and guidelines, I think for the next few months, this is our focus, how we incorporate that. We are also prepping for a separate leadership onboarding, and our global communications team is leading that with us, where we'll do a formal leadership onboarding program and coach them through early stages and give them very tactical items to do on Yammer so that it's easy for them. And then featuring and elevating help community. So we've been doing this, and this has turned out very fruitful for us. As an example, we have something called Aon Technology Hub, where it's one of our top 10 communities, and it supports timely communication, and it actually reduces help desk tickets. Very popular with colleagues. So we are working on how do we highlight these more, tell colleagues to join these. So I'm really excited with this rollout, and we are hoping that the Yammer 2.0 adoption goes really well for us. And next year, I hope to share the performance with you all.